Wow, welcome everyone. It's so great to see so many people coming in. While we admit people from the chat, from the waiting room, if you'd like to put something in the chat about where you're from, it's always fun to see where people are coming from. There, we've got somebody from Appalachia, Austin, Texas, Lyman, Maine, all over
Fairbanks.
Fairbanks.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow, Oregon, Utah.
Did I see Sweden go by? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I might have seen Sweden go
You
by.
did. Orkney Islands too.
Wow. Isn't that great?
Ontario, Missoula.
Kona, Hawaii. Aloha.
All
Welcome.
these places are great, even the ones we're not calling out. We just saw England and Australia just came by. This is a lovely custom. Barcelona, all right. Um, this is I love these invitations. Where are you here from? I believe I just saw Mongolia. Is that possible?
Is it? Oh my goodness. In Kauai. Yeah, I love it too when the people come from Maine, but you get a sense that this is a global community here.
Yes, and I see a friend has come by. Every once in a while, I actually recognize a name. This is the only time I ever read the chats because otherwise I'm otherwise involved. But I do read these.
Yes, and we will have an opportunity for folks to put some questions in the chat at the end of Jane's reading. And um, Liz, who's on here, and I'll introduce in a second, will be scanning the chat for your questions so we can field some for Jane, because I'm sure there will be. But I think that we should probably get started because we have a very full program today and we've got a lot to talk about. So, welcome back to the Poets Corner, or welcome to those of you who are here for the first time. I'm Meg Weston. I'm the founder and host of the Poets Corner. And 2025 is our fifth anniversary of the founding of this entity, whatever you might call it. 5 years ago, as you all probably remember, we were sheltered in, and I and my friend Catherine Seitz, who is co-founder, who's no longer able to be involved, but we were desperate for some community around writing and poetry. So we said, well, let's host something on Zoom, a reading, and let's do it on the second Sunday of the month. And let's invite people we know and ask them who else we might want to invite. And it has grown. I never imagined it would be the size and scale it is today. We have over 8,000 people from all over the world on our mailing list. And we've been doing this for, I think, 65 different readings. Um, so it's free. It's the second Sunday, usually, of each month. And we host distinguished poets like our guest today, Jane Hirshfield, as well as emerging writers and others who respond to an open call. And we have one coming up that I'll tell you a little bit about. Lucas Adair has been our incredibly competent technical host since the very beginning. And if you have technical questions, you can email directly to the host, and Lucas will respond to you. And then this past year, I was joined by the very talented Liz Collick as our strategy and design director. So I just want to say a few words about upcoming events on the Poets Corner before I introduce Jane and turn the program over to her. We've just launched our 5th annual Ekphrastic Challenge in partnership with Page Gallery, who's here in Camden, Maine, but hosts an exhibition online at thepagegallery.com. And you can submit a poem in response to any of the images in that exhibition. And that submissions will be open until October 25th. And it's handled through Submittable. The links are on our website. 10 poets will be selected to read on the Poets' Corner on Sunday, November 9th. And we'll notify the selected poets by the 5th of November. That's a lot of dates to remember. There's also 10 poets selected by the artists that will be represented in a live reading in the gallery the following Saturday, November 16th. So all of the dates are on our website, and be sure to submit some poems. We always get some wonderful ekphrastic poems. And this year, being our 5th anniversary, we're going to produce a chapbook with some poems, just a few selected poems from each year that we've been doing it, along with the artwork. On December 7th, we have the return of our most popular event of the year, usually. It's Reading Rilke Today, and it's hosted by the wonderful Rilke scholar and translator and poet Mark Burroughs, who's a dear friend and lives right here in Camden. And he'll be joined once again by the Irish poet and peace activist Padraig O'Tuma, who hosts the popular podcast Poetry Unbound, as well as Kayleen Asbo. And Kayleen is a composer, teacher, and poet who founded Mythica, an online educational company that weaves together music, art, poetry, and spirituality. And it will be a wonderful conversation about the relevance of Rilke's poetry in our lives today. I also want to tell you that next year, 2026 Camden Festival of Poetry will feature as our keynote the poet and essayist Amy Nezuko-Matato. If you don't already know her work, you're in for a treat. I'm sure many of you do, but there's also a podcast on the Camden Festival of Poetry.org with I'm reading 2 of her poems that I particularly love and talking about them. The podcast is called Poetry Medicine for the Soul. And for the first time, we're offering a residency, a festival residency for a poet outside of the state of Maine who wants to come stay for a month in the Millay House in Rockland, where Edna St. Vincent Millay was born, and offer a workshop at the festival, attend the festival, and it comes with a $500 travel stipend. Applications are now open, and you can find that link on our website too. So lots of good stuff coming up, but let's move on to the pleasures of today's reading with Jane Hirshfield. Jane was here in Camden last year as the keynote presenter. I guess earlier this year, the keynote presenter for our festival. And it was my joy to be able to spend a few days with her for Dharma talk, a craft talk, some meals together, and her wonderful keynote. I've also been spending time the last year reading from her latest book of new and selected poems, The Asking, and taking some classes about Jane's book with the local poet and professor emeritus of CUNY, Ellen Goldsmith. So I feel privileged to have had this opportunity to delve more deeply than I might ordinarily do into a poet's work. And at the same time, I feel like I've just skimmed the surface of a very deep pond. Jane is the author of 10 collections of poetry, as well as 2 thoughtful volumes of essays about poetry, and 4 co-translated volumes presenting world poets from the past. She's been described as one of our culture's most beloved writers, and I can see why. I don't want to take up any more time telling you about her because she's here to speak for herself. So there will be a chance for you to post questions in the chat after reading. But without anything further, please join me in welcoming Jane Hirshfield.
Well, thank you so much, Meg. And I am just in awe of what Poets Corner has become. Coming from a fairly small local community group to international offerings gracefully and with incredible speed and seemingly flawless. So whatever might be happening backstage, you've done an amazing thing, and we all benefit from it. I'm sometimes at these events as a listener. So I thought I would begin with the poem. I don't know how many people actually pay any attention to titles or descriptions of events, but this event took its title from one of my very short pebble poems, and so I thought I'd start with that one. The poem is Opening the Hands Between Here and Here. On the dark road, only the weight of the rope, yet the horse is there. So the context and the description of this reading had to do with meeting this difficult moment. How do we face into this moment of plummeting world that we find ourselves in? And that sense of you're walking on a dark road and you have no idea what is under your feet, what is in front of you, what is behind you. But there is the weight of the rope. And the horse is there. And you can imagine in this poem, in this time, in this context, that maybe the horse is all of you. Maybe the horse is our sense of solidarity, that we do not walk through our crises alone. And it is certainly what poetry provides. One thing that poems have given me all my life is the knowledge that whatever it is I go through in my life, someone else has lived through it and has left their witness and testimony, has left a poem that shows it is not only survivable, it is navigable, it is meetable with your own creative and resilient heart mind. So I do have to say that, one of the things of my life is that, when you do a big new and selected poems, and it's a huge book, it's 50 years of work in here. It makes you a little more retrospective. And, when I was 17, I went to the very first Earth Day. And that was 1970. And we knew everything we needed to know then about what we needed to do. We knew it in terms of the environment. We knew it in terms of the biosphere. We knew it in terms of the social compact. It was all clear. And I have to say that one of the great surprises of my life is to find ourselves in the moment we are in now, given how clear it was then. I am kind of stunned always. Even though, I saw it happening every step of the way, I was here for it. So anyhow, I thought I would give us, before going into the poems of meeting calamity, I thought I would give us one poem that comes out of that and sort of changes my relationship to it, because it's not a heavy, dire poem. It's a poem about being surprised. And I know that surprise is one of the things I turn to poetry for, I turn to art for. We want to see with new eyes. we want to feel and understand in new ways. So anyhow, here's the poem. I wanted to be surprised. To such a request, the world is obliging. In just the past week, a rotund porcupine who seemed equally startled by me. The man who swallowed a tiny microphone to record the sounds of his body, not considering beforehand how he might remove it. A cabbage and mustard sandwich on marbled bread. How easily the large spiders were caught with a clear plastic cup surprised even them. I don't know why I was surprised every time love started or ended, or why each time a new fossil, Earth-like planet, or war, or that no one kept being there when the doorknob had clearly. What should not have been so surprising, my error after error, recognized when appearing on the faces of others. What did not surprise enough, my daily expectation that anything would continue, and then that so much did continue when so much did not. Small rivulets still flowing downhill when it wasn't raining. A sister's birthday. Also, the stubborn, courteous persistence that even today, please means please. Good morning is still understood as good morning, and that when I wake up, the window's distant mountain remains a mountain. The borrowed city around me is still a city and standing. Its alleys and markets, offices of dentists, drugstore, liquor store, Chevron. Its library that charges a happy surprise, no fine for overdue books. Borges, Baldwin, Szymborska, Morrison, Cavafy. So that was that poem. And it was just, my sister died in 2004 and her birthday was 3 days ago. And you never stop noticing it. You know, oh, it's Lori's birthday today. It continues more present than that she isn't here in a way, that she was, that it was her birthday. They're always trying to find a present for her. Okay, so now we get into the theme of meeting the difficult moment. And I've been writing about that theme for a very long time in various ways. And I'm going to give you a poem that probably, you know, any of you who've heard me before in recent years will have heard this. This is the poem that I wrote New Year's morning, 2020. And y'all might remember that moment in time. The election was over, but January 6th was about to happen, and somehow one had that uneasy knowledge that all was not resolved. And here we are now, knowing that uneasy knowledge extended far beyond what happened on January 6th, 2020. So the poem is at that moment in time. So when it refers to things like sending postcards, I was taking a political action every day of some kind, useless or, you know, possibly not, didn't matter, just doing something. And that's what the postcards are. There's also a lot of reference to house cleaning. Every New Year's Eve, I do a ridiculously thorough Japanese temple style cleaning of my house. So here's the poem. Counting New Year's morning, what powers yet remain to me? The world asks, as it asks daily, and what can you make, can you do to change my deep broken, fractured? I count this first day of another year what remains. I have a mountain, a kitchen, 2 hands. Can admire with 2 eyes the mountain, actual, recalcitrant, shuffling its pebbles, sheltering foxes and beetles. Can make black-eyed peas and collards. Can make from last year's late ripening persimmons a pudding. Can climb a step ladder, change the bulb in a track light. For years, I woke each day first to the mountain, then to the question. The feet of the new sufferings followed the feet of the old, and still they surprised. I brought salt, brought oil to the question, brought sweet tea, brought postcards and stamps for years, each day something. Stone did not become apple. War did not become peace. Yet joy still stays joy, sequins stay sequins, words still bespangle, bewilder. Today, I woke without answer. The day answers, unpockets a thought as though from a friend. Don't despair of this falling world, not yet. Didn't it give you the asking? So often poetry books are really hard to title, and this one, that title, The Asking, came really quickly and immediately, and I knew it was right. Because for me, that is the spirit of almost anything I need to navigate, is to try to find the spirit of what is this? How can I? What might? Possibility. And that, of course, is the spirit that every poem comes out of, some increase of possibility. Now, some of the poems I'm going to be reading you, Meg asked me if I might read. And so this next one is one of them. This poem I wrote in 2014, and it was originally written as a poem thinking about the crisis of the biosphere. When it was published, it became a political poem instantly and went very viral that day. And since then, it has kind of returned to being a poem of the biosphere and has become, in a small way, a kind of anthem within the environmental movement, used in various ways. It's a poem that imagines the future looking back at us, knowing what we did in this pivotal moment, how it turned out. And it is a poem that hopes to make itself meaningless and untrue. Let them not say. Let them not say, we did not see it. We saw. Let them not say, we did not hear it. We heard. Let them not say, they did not taste it. We ate. We trembled. Let them not say, it was not spoken, not written. We spoke. We witnessed with voices and hands. Let them not say, they did nothing. We did not enough. Let them say, as they must say, something. A kerosene beauty. It burned. Let them say, we warmed ourselves by it, read by its light, praised, and it burned. So, of course, it is that we did not enough that I am hoping will become. We did not enough will be the untrue line in that poem. Any of you who find yourself moved to go stand in some community of people next Saturday, I really believe in doing that myself. So I'm already noticing the clock is just running by. So I'm going to skip a poem and go to another poem. This poem has to do with war, and it was written, it could be any war, because this is true of almost every war, but it was written with the Syrian civil war in mind. I think I won't say anything else about it. I'll just read it. Words. Words are loyal. Whatever they name, they take the side of. As the word courage will afterward grip just as well The frightened girl soldier who stands on one side of barbed wire, the frightened boy soldier who stands on the other. Death's clay. They look at each other with wide open eyes, and words that love peace, love gossip, refuse to condemn them. And of course, I chose to read that poem today in hope that the ceasefire in Gaza will hold, and in memory of how many of the people involved in it are just that boy and that girl, found themselves in impossible situations. I know that is not most people's response, but I feel that. I feel the accident of where I was born and who I was born. You know, I could have been born in Sudan. I would have had another life. Again, skipping a poem I meant to read. I promised in the description, for any of you who might have read the description of the event, that I would read some new poems. So this is a poem since the asking. You know, the paperback of the asking just came out, you know, maybe a month ago, but the hardback came out in 2023. And so I've had some time to write some new poems. And this one, again, it's a little bit longer, but I've liked reading it recently. It came from, so Atel Adnan, most people don't recognize that name, but Atel Adnan, when I was a young poet coming up into the world of poetry in my county, Atel was very famous as she was at the time the best known writer writing in Arabic who lived in America, and she was a poet. And she also, we all knew she painted, you know, Atel also painted, and she gave them away to various friends. At the end of her life, Atel was living with her partner Simone Fattal in Paris, and she became really famous as a painter. She had shows at the Louvre, and she was in the Whitney Biennial, and you know, one-woman shows in Berlin. So at the end of her life, at about the age 100, 99, 100, she was having these one-woman shows. The name of the mountain in my county is Mount Tam. She had a view of Mount Tam. I have a view of Mount Tam every morning when I wake up. And she continued to paint that shape long after she left living here. And I was reading after she died some things, and this quote from a letter sort of came by, and I was so struck by it that just this sentence invited in the whole poem that followed. I suppose I should say, you know, she was born in Lebanon. So here's her quote. "And if you like numbers, I will tell you that here on earth," and here's the poem. "I wake thinking about a woman with whom I once shared a mountain. If you, as she did, like numbers, I can tell you that here on earth this day, it is 55 degrees, a June 9th, uncommonly cold. I can tell you that for company now, this day, you have roughly 8 billion living kin. I can tell you that since sapiens beginning, 117 billion have breathed in, out, and in again then, at least once. That worldwide this day, 1 person in 7 is hungry. That 32 countries are listed as zones in conflict. That Beirut, where the woman was born, is called past the brink. If you like numbers, I can tell you a single great blue heron flew earlier by a 10-windowed alcove, that in Canada, 10.6 million acres burn today still unchecked, though this morning the smoke has moved elsewhere, its parts per millions returning their color to 2 big wings folded up in a tree. I can tell you conceived yesterday something like 385,000 babies, and that tomorrow 158,000, all ages, will probably die. There is also this to consider about numbers: the way that the more a life's counted, the less a life seems to count. I can tell you that one person born in Beirut, dead in Paris, for a time shared with me a mountain in California she never forgot. I can tell you its colors inside her paintings still astonish. Mountain, 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 kept saying her brush. Skipping another new poem that has the wildfires in it, and reading a poem that Meg had requested. So these are all, poems of this urgent and dire and plummeting moment, this whole section. But with this next one, we're going to do a slight transition into something else, related, not separate. So this is a cataclysm. It begins subtly. The maple withdraws an inch from the birch tree. The porcupine wants nothing to do with the skink. Fish unschool. Sheep unflock to separately graze. Clouds, meanwhile, declare to the sky they have nothing to do with the sky, which is not visible as they are, nor knows the trick of turning into infant, tumbling pterodactyls. The turtles and moonlight, their long arrangement is over. As for the humans, let us not speak of the humans, let us speak of their language. The first person singular condemns the second person plural. For betrayals, neither has words left to name. The fed consider the hungry and stay silent. I just hate that one has to write such poems. It's really difficult to write such descriptions of this world that we live in. The last poem in that book, Ledger, is a poem of apology. I'm not going to read it to you, but it was a poem basically saying, I'm sorry I wrote so many dark poems when the world still has such beauty in it. Okay, so I said something in Cataclysm when I put that on the reading list. The bit about the pronouns laid on, first person singular, second person plural. I have written a great many poems in my life that have been germinated out of my interest in pronouns and what we mean when we say them, and that it is so unfixed and various. And so I thought I would read you a few poems that have to do with this sense of what is a self? Where does the self begin and end? And the first of them, I don't know how many of them I'll actually get to, but the first of them, it doesn't actually talk about pronouns. The next one, if I feel like I have time and read it, does. But this is very much a poem about what I said earlier, the accident of we happen to be born into the time and place that we are. And existence is continuous and shared. So the poem is called My Dust, and I wrote it after reading a poem by a Chinese poet, Wang Jiaxin, who has a new book out called At the Same Time, and you must get it. It's a brilliant, marvelous book. Yes, I saw that for once. That was all caps and I could see it. It is on the list to read that poem. The chat just came up. And Jiaxin, who I have come to know as a friend, his poem borrowed the phrase "my dust" from a poem by Osip Mandelstam. And I tell you this because both of their names show up in the second stanza. So, my dust. I too have borrowed my dust. and soon now must return it, I think. But to who? To what? To Ossip or Yashin? A ginkgo? A lakefish? A cranefly? Humility matters, my dust says. Don't try to recall who you were. A time, a language beyond your own skin. I borrow my dust to make coffee. It is almost weightless. I sit at the table. I drink. Table bought at a flea market. Table without ambition or lies, standing on 4 oak legs belonging to no one. The table too is dusty, muting its gleam. The world's whirlwinds are distant, almost unheard. The unopened nearby newspaper, almost unseen. Whose luck do I wear this morning? Whose hopes? Whose coffee? Whose table do I sit at? Made by whose hands? No one deserves their fate. A person opens into a day as if lifting a window. Its motes fall slowly, calmly, like a hatch of very small spiders, whose lives I will never be able to know or imagine. So that sense of provisionality, that just haunts me. It really does. So I'm going to give you this other pronoun poem, which I don't think I have ever read aloud. It's pretty recent, and I just don't think I've ever read it. So it's called Request. When I say the pronoun I request you to ask, which one? The shoes of oneself may or may not fit the feet of another. One's sense of the comic may lower the eyes of the rest. Journals, letters, notes at the backs of books, these are fata morgana. The street address working for 2 or 3, for others, knocked at unanswered. And if this I, now saying you, who seems to be me, strikes you as muddled, myopic, mistaken, I ask you, forgive in advance its forgetfulness, clumsiness, misplaced longings. Another, a different self will come, given time, though it too will be one small part only of an untellable story. A single scouting ant, wandering a star-filled, spinning and spiral-armed kitchen, from which it may or may not bring back to the nest some coffee cake's yellow, sweet-buttered crumb. Okay, I have only a few minutes left, so let me just look at what I had planned and see what I'm going to read. Okay, 3 poems as a set, and then one more. And one of the poems in that set already chosen was, oh, I hate to tell you what I'm skipping. I'm skipping the 3 poems looking directly this moment at catastrophe. But I am giving you 3 poems that are in what became a series. I never know in advance that I'm going to be writing a series. I write a poem with a title or a concept, and then I notice I write a second poem with the same form of title or context, and then all of a sudden I go, oh, I'm doing a series. I wonder how long that's going to last. So these are 3 poems whose title is all I speak with something or other. And that means in dialogue with it. The first one is the New Yorker poem that somebody said, please be sure to read. And I realized it's a little misleading because I speak with gravity could be the description of how I'm speaking, and it's not. I'm speaking to gravity. I speak with gravity. To your left, the word gravid, the weight of new life. To your right, the word grave, place for putting a body once it's become only weight. Between them, existence, ambush of amazement, you. I pause. I look out my window. The big leafed maple today looks back undecided. Some leaves wither brown, some keep green. For a tree, gravity is simple. A branch growing upward is neither hope nor resistance. A branch growing downward is not surrender. One shape just becomes another. To find light, if it must, the whole trunk will twist. A tree doesn't grieve that gravity will soon enough sweep it all in, before into after, existence's only offer. And yet, about time, gravity, you are silent. With your one unchanging thought, what could you say? A musical note never changing goes unheard. My friend who is dying, still in you. I, still in you. 2 leaves, almost weightless. I speak with history. I know it has always been thus, that somewhere, someone not separate from others, each moment enters your kiln, your smelter, your furnace. Continual and irreparable your inventions, continual and irreparable their need for fuel, for us, a burning born into of indescribable pain. We know this, and still with respect, my request that you, history, your stories and murals, your thrown dice choices, might step out for a coffee, slip into a nap in the shade, that some might for a moment forgive you. Is this choice not also heroic, not also worthy? To find beautiful, like any other minor and thirsty mammal, one moment's ripple of creek under trees. And here's the third in this series. I speak with the future. Oh, there's one word in here that not everyone will necessarily know. The word is kalpa, and that comes from Hindu and Buddhist cosmology. A kalpa is an incredibly long period of time in the way the word is usually used. So I'm changing it up a little. I speak with the future. We sit on our skeleton's bones. We hear with our skeleton's bones. We speak of beauty by moving our jaws and our teeth. The original meaning of paradise, a place, a walled garden. Our lives, our stories, this hour inside it. A staircase from Piranesi, a hummingbird drinking. Outside it, vanishing species and rivers. Outside it, Nanjing, Nineveh, Dresden. Outside it, Gaza, Sudan, Myanmar, Kiev. Here, The world starts and ends, starts, ends, ends again, restarts. A kalpa is brief and wall-less. Unborn ones, take nothing for granted, not nectar, not thirst. May your lives be uneclipsed, your failures be passing. May you have your portions of beauty, of grief, in a garden whose plants and birds I cannot imagine. So I will run very slightly over my stop time and give you one more poem from the book before we turn to conversation and questions. This is from the new poem section of the book, and it is, one of the great teachings of Buddhism is you're always supposed to remember that you're going to die, and that shifts your ethics, gives you some humility, increases your gratitude. And this poem is sort of responding to that, but it makes a small change on it. Each morning calls us to praise this world that is fleeting. Each morning, waking amidst the not ever before, dressing inside the not ever again. Under sunlight or cloud, brushing the hair. Not yet arrived at the end crimped finish, drinking coffee and buttering toast. Permitted to slip into coat, into shoes, I go out. I count myself part. Carrying only a weightless shadow, whose each corner joins and departs from the shadows of others. Mortal, alive among others, equally fragile. And with luck, for days even sometimes, this luxury, this extra gift, able to even forget it. All right.
Oh,
Thank you.
you.
Over to Meg.
Well, both of us here, and we will take questions from the chat in a little bit too. But I just want to thank you, Jane. That was just such a beautiful reading, and I'm missing all the poems that you said you were skipping over. Maybe we'll have a little time for the end to include some of them. Because my curiosity is piqued and I can't just go look at the book for them.
No, you
That they
can't.
were
I'm
new.
sorry.
But I love that you ended with this, each morning calls us to praise the world that is fleeting. Because I think as we talked about this, the concept for this reading today and meeting the moment with poetry, there were two aspects of that, at least anyway, in my mind. One is that recognition of beauty that exists despite everything that might be going on in our lives or in the world around us. And the other is what you also did in reading many of these poems, is that ability to speak truth to what is happening. And when I first read your work, it started with Ledger. And I thought, oh, these are really dark as you described them. And yet, when we were talking about today's reading, and I was throwing a few poems out that I thought would be wonderful, so many of them came from that section in the asking about Ledger, or from Ledger.
Yeah.
Because it was so important to talk about the biosphere and the greater world. So I'm wondering what gives you hope these days, and what do you turn to for inspiration and beauty?
So I took up the practice some years ago. I did a reading set of readings in Australia, and I encountered something they say in Australia, which I'd not heard before, which is it's a general exclamation of happiness that takes the form, you beauty. Um, so, you beauty isn't necessarily saying you are beautiful. It just, you beauty, that's great is a kind of synonym. And I loved that phrase. And I took it up as a practice to every morning when I open my eyes, whatever it is I first see, which is when I'm home, it will be Mount Tam, but in a hotel room, it's probably something pretty dull. But whatever I first see, to greet it with you beauty. Because I think one of the great struggles for us all in this difficult, difficult time, and in any tremendously difficult time in a personal life or in history, in the public realms, is how do you not fall into total despair and passivity because you have lost all hope? And for me, remembering to look for the beauty, to be, any gleam of light that you see in the worst circumstances is confirmation that you are still alive in existence. And existence is large. For me to find hope, a great deal of it has to do with the humility of recognizing that whatever it is my immediate world looks like is not the totality of existence. You can walk out at night and look at the stars and see how large the universe is. That gives me hope. Time gives me hope. Poems give me hope because they increase, they remind you that it's always possible that something is going to surprise you. History gives you hope, and the Buddhist teaching of transience gives you hope because everything changes. Everything changes. It might take a long time. We might not live to see it, but everything changes. That gives me hope. The incredible sense of solidarity I feel as I go through the world and I find so many people who think and care about the same things I do, and do so in ways, wildly original, local and large, and just there's so much company in what we who happen to be gathered here today wish for the future. So it is, none of this is easily won. I'm a pessimistic person. My nature is to be a bit on the Eeyore side of the scale. As a child, I would say it was quite more than a bit. But over my lifetime, it has felt like a task to become a person who can remember the larger beauty, who can remember the larger existence. This is who I kind of, worked my way towards being, or was given the gift of being led towards being by other people's lives and poems and examples and resilience. Any of the people who we most want to read, Václav Havel or Mandela, people who, in prison, in the worst circumstances, the Turkish poet Hikmet in prison, writing love letters to his wife and praising, the one tree he could see through the bars of his small window. They have all taught me that this is how you counter despair. And so now it comes into my poems. My borrowed dust from Mandelstam and from Wang Jiaxin. Have I
That's
answered your
wonderful.
question?
I love Hickman's poem.
Yes,
that
I do as
I
well.
didn't know I loved.
Yeah.
Oh, that's just one of my
Yeah.
favorites. And I love that expression, you beauty. And it's funny, I was preparing for this as much as I could, but I was looking through YouTube and I happened to click on a reading you did 17 years ago, someplace in California.
My
And
goodness.
one, I have to say, you look almost exactly the same. Just Lovely.
Yeah, well, you know, Zoom is being kind to me. Come closer. You'll see some evidence.
But I was struck by the poems you were reading in that and the poems you're working on today, that I feel like it's expanded, that your view of the world and the universe and that seems to me what you were just talking about, that expansiveness, that when we look at things in that concept of geological time or deep time, you know, a lot of our fears become very small, and a lot of our concerns become, you know, not insignificant, because they're never insignificant, but I don't know. I think there's a metaphysical element in your poetry today, and that I was struck by that in this poem that we had emailed about, this difficult day,
Oh,
where,
right.
where you have this ontological protest in the poem. I
Yeah.
wondered if you might read that poem.
You don't have the page number in front of you, do you? I'll
Um,
find it.
yeah, I think I do. Where did I put it? Page 22.
Okay,
I
so
think it's in the new poems.
yes, it's in the new poems section. It was interesting to me that you pulled that one out because it's, you know, there are some poems you hear a lot about and there are some poems you never hear about. And this is a poem I've never heard about. So
Oh,
thank
good.
you for it. It is often the case, you know, sometimes 7 years will go by and someone will finally say something about a poem that you really liked, but nobody ever said anything. So here's the poem, The Difficult Day. Looking through the difficult day to see the mountain, I heard, through, you are making an error. Whose voice this ontological protest? The days? The mountains? Some distant piano or hawk? I couldn't tell. Only that it stepped between suffering and suffering, like a rock going through a window before it has broken. So, you know, it was a difficult day when I wrote this. And I think what happened was I simply, you know, often my poems come to me, an inner voice is speaking, and I recognize that it is not the chatter of ordinary inner voice, that it is a poem arriving, and so I'm writing it down. And so I would have, you know, first written looking through the difficult day to see the mountain. And there's already, you know, that's already saying something. You know, the mountain is outside my difficult day. And then very literally, you know, the editor voice came through and through. No, you are making an error. You know, there is no through. And so the rest of the poem, it was basically working out. So what was the error there? What's my problem? Um, and I'm not sure I can paraphrase what I arrived at in this poem. You know, stepped between suffering and suffering like a rock going through a window before it is broken. So there's a little magical realism at the end. It's got something to do with non-separation. It's got something to do with the mountain and my day are not divisible. And it's not about getting rid of the difficulty. I liked very much that in what you were just saying, you kind of corrected yourself and said it's not insignificant, because it is our job to feel urgently the suffering and the crisis of this moment and to act on it. You know, the additional, the addition of being able to still recognize beauty is the antidote to despair that allows us to continue on. It lets you open your eyes the next day. It is not erasing that extinctions and hatred and violence and incomprehensible choices are being made and it is our job to throw our pebbles into the lake and hope that some ripple will reach the shore of the future, because each of us has tried to do that. But through is an interesting word. Through is also the opening of the new poem section is also about the word through to some extent. Through has these multiple meanings. I'm going to read that poem. I know you didn't ask me
Yeah,
to, but
no, go
door
right.
and
That's great.
sentence. My life, you were a door I was given to walk through, dawdling in lintel and loose strife as much as permitted. Your own glass knob, I spoke you. A sentence, however often rewritten, ending always with the same slightly rusty hinged preposition, sometimes for mercy hidden. And so I don't know how many people bother to figure out what this poem is talking about, but it's that first sentence, my life, you were a door I was given to walk through. And, we were all taught never to end sentences with prepositions, and yet there I do it. And the thing is, through is a word that means both finished and in the middle of the duration of. So it is a hinged word with these double meanings. And somehow, even though that's not, you're always supposed to start a book of poems with something really strong. That's not the strongest of the new poems. But as a way to enter a book looking at 50 years of work, somehow it felt like this poem of the doorknob felt like a good way to go in. So that's what I did, ignoring the
It's
excellent
right.
advice.
It's the right poem. And I think that that image of the rock breaking the glass, for me, that the difficult day poem, it just breaks it wide open.
Thank you. Thank you.
I might go ask Liz if there's some questions in the chat already, and I invite you to put some more in the chat. I noticed one there were so many people commenting on 9 gates and 10 windows and wondering if there's a 11 something coming.
Yes, that's the joke, that the next book of essays is going to have to be something like 11 dormers. I don't know. I have a fairly good number of new essays since 10 Windows came out. To turn those essays into a book, even, I don't think I've got 11 of them yet, but it's a lot of work. So I imagine there will be a next book of essays, but I am not racing towards facing the doing of it. They all get revised, 27 more times. It takes 27 revisions to get them written in order to give in the first place, and then another 27 revisions before they end up in print. So I'm really, I'm sort of excited to finish the one that you talked about in the event description, the making the invisible visible
Yeah.
one. That's a really long essay. It's longer than the version that I was able to say when I gave it as the Academy of American Poets annual lecture. And some of those sections were roughly written, some of them were completely written, and some of them weren't written at all. The ones that I sort of said, oh, now we're skipping. But they all have to be finished before that one is even ready, let alone a full book. But yeah, I keep being asked to talk in public, and so I keep writing these essays, and there should be another book unless I die first, which always possible.
Well, that one, at least what you've got of that is available on the web, and I
Yes.
highly recommend it, because this whole idea of science and poetry being similar and the same, coming from that same curiosity and desire to ask the questions, if you will.
Yes.
And I just loved that talk and how important that was. And I feel like that poem that you started with that we used as the title, opening the hands from here to here, does that. It makes this what's in the dark, what's
Yeah. Thank you.
invisible, visible.
Thank you.
Oh, you might have heard my dog barking behind me. Hopefully not. Hopefully um, that Zoom takes it out.
It does, Meg. I didn't hear it.
Oh, good. Liz, do you have some questions?
Yeah, we do. Someone put in the chat the question. It was kind of a longer question that I've synthesized about wanting you to comment, Jane, about writing undire poems in dire times.
What a great question.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I do think that's connected with what we were talking about earlier with continue to perceive beauty under the worst circumstances, because A, it exists, it's true, and B, it will help you continue to open your eyes. I had an interesting experience with I'm going to answer this in a particular rather than a general way. When the most recent election happened, I had the most extraordinary sense of just déjà vu. When the 2016 election happened, I felt not only what happened in those 4 years, but what is happening now. It was so all those really dire poems in Ledger were written, not every one, because I was writing about the crisis of the biosphere before that election, but many, many of the poems in Ledger were written as direct responses to the events of the first iteration of the dire time, which in America we specifically are having now. Apologies to those of you who are coming in from other countries. I'm speaking about what it's like to live here now and what's going on here now. So we got this election, and I felt, and then we got the inauguration, and then we got the events. And I kept feeling, well, I already wrote the poem that responds to it because I wrote it the first time around. It was shocking and startling that, the fifth day of this administration, this time, was exactly the same events as of 8 years before, that was the day the White House took down all the environmental information and all the scientists were told they were not allowed to speak about their science to the public. And of course, the undoing of science has been much worse this time. The attack on science and on reality is to me unfathomable. But I'd already written the poem on the fifth day. It was in Ledger, and all I could say was, well, here it is again. It's like it's the exact same thing, and I had written the poem. And so for the first probably 2 months of this return to those dire circumstances, I was writing personal poems. I was not writing poems that responded to the public events, because I had been responding to the public events all along and nothing new. It's like I didn't have anything new. And I wondered, will I have something new? I don't want to ever write the same poem over and over, even though there are certain themes that haunt me. Oh, your dog is behind your shoulder. It's adorable. Look at that beautiful dog. Sorry. I don't want to write the same poem again. Poems are instruments to make a new discovery. And so even though I've noticed in the poems I have been writing more recently, there are a lot of poems that are thinking about the future. I'm quite haunted by that now. But I hope they're not the same poem. I hope they're different poems that are thinking about the future. But I did not feel badly. I did not feel like I was making some terrible error by not writing new poems about these things which were, like somebody was taking a mallet to my heart and mind and spirits. That I was writing the poems of my personal life and my personal inquiry. That goes on. That is our job too. It is not wrong to attend to the intimacies of your own life, garden, aging, losses, loves, joys, griefs. We must be full human beings. And to be a full human being means we respond to every part of our day and our existence. We don't just decide, I have this set task and it's that one thing. Now, some poets do, and I don't want to say that's wrong. It's not wrong. There's nothing wrong. But for me, it is very important to not lose any of the 360 degrees. And so that I was writing poems of the interior for a while. I was just glad to be writing anything, really, to write any poem. I'm not a daily writer. I'm not that prolific. I don't know how I wrote all these poems. I really don't. My basic impression of myself is that I'm never writing. So it is a mystery to me why there are so many poems from this person who never writes. Um, so it's just, to answer the question, give yourself permission. Give yourself permission to have your muse look any direction your muse wishes to look, and trust that you are not abrogating your citizenish duties if you write about the private life, because we as human beings, our lives are continuous up and down the scale of events. If you stub your toe for that moment, that ringing pain is the totality of your existence. And if you read a news story that you find undoing, that ringing pain is the totality of your existence. And you will, in time, if you keep writing, respond to them all.
I love that permission slip, to those of us that write and think, well, what's the point? Or is this worthy? And also you talked about, we write to discover.
Yeah.
And without starting, you don't discover.
Yes, and without starting without a preset idea of where you're going, you don't discover. You have to not know. In order to know something new, you have to first not know everything you think you know. I'm going to add something to that, which is to say, so when the 2016 election happened, I began doing something which, all the way through from then until now is still pretty much true, which is everything I read, what I wanted to read, were, poets, fiction, nonfiction books by or about people who had gone through times of great crisis, who had lived through catastrophic times. And I did this because I felt like I needed to know, how did they do it? What does it look like? Seeing what we're going into now. How did people before me do it? And the first thing I picked up the night of the election in 2016 was Marina Tsvetaeva, the Russian poet, her poems. She was a woman who she was flung about by the political catastrophes of her day. One of her daughters died of starvation during the Russian Revolution. She lived in exile. Her husband was accused of being a spy, and it turned out he was. She died by suicide in the Second World War with enough money in her pocket to pay for half a loaf of bread. It was a very hard life. And yet she fell in love. She wrote poems of, gay response to things that were happening. I found this little prose poem, which I will not do justice to by my poor paraphrase, but so during the Russian Revolution, all the horses were confiscated for military use. and the streets got covered with snow. And apparently they used to use, like, horses the way we use snowplows to clear the streets. And they couldn't clear the street. And she's got this little poem about, all the people on her street got together and brought in a camel. And a camel cleared the snow. And it's like, I love that poem. And that poem showed me that, part of resilience is having both imagination and a sense of humor. So that really helped me. And so that is also part of my answer to all of this. Marina Svitaeva showed me, young people do keep falling in love, in the worst of circumstances, people fall in love. And this is right. They should, they need to. Okay, another question?
I think someone was asking Liz, and I've lost the question about what poets you're reading today or that are inspiring you today.
Yeah.
So I will definitely say again, get this new translation. It's the second English selected poems translations by Wang Yashin. He is a poet of the world, and his poems are in conversation with all the poets I myself read. He's got poems in dialogue with Akhmatova and Mandelstam and Miłosz and also Bob Hass and also me, So he wrote a poem about that table covered with books behind my shoulder because he visited me here once. Oh, thank you, Liz. You've put up the link to it. I appreciate
good.
that. So read that book. I am currently reading a fair amount of the Czech immunologist Miroslav Holub, who I had read before, but I found that the English publisher Blood Axe had come out with a larger selected poems than any of his books that I had, so there were new poems by him for me to be able to read because more had been translated. And he again, a poet who lived through Soviet occupation, the Second World War, a great poet of political poems written in times of censorship. The selected poems from Blood Axe is called Poems Before and After. And the before poems were poems when he could not speak freely. They were poems of the occupation years. And after were the poems after the Velvet Revolution, when he could speak freely. So, those are the, I'm still reading my beloved Polish poets. I'm still reading Hikmet. I pull up again and again. There is another new translation by a lesser known poet, and this is Poems of the Personal Life. This is not political, but it's a very good book, and a friend who I trust told me I must read it. And I'm not going to remember the title, only the author, but the American, poet in her own right, wonderful poet, Jody Gladding, did a translation of an elder French woman poet, Marie Leclerc. No, Marie Claire Blancart, Marie Claire Blancart. I think I've got that right. I hope so. The poems from the end of her life. So it was her late poems written in the knowledge of her own, lived end of life. And that's a genre I've liked since I was a lot further from the end of my life than I presumably am now. I just love poems that are written by people who have lived the arc of their life and still have all of their powers. And, she reminds me a lot, this French poet who I had never heard of before. She reminds me a lot of Jean Valentine. So anyone listening to this who likes Jean Valentine's poems would probably like Marie Claire Blancart. So that's enough. Otherwise, I just start spewing titles.
Those are lovely recommendations
you.
and very international, which I love.
I
too.
read internationally. I have all my life, and I still do. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be disrespectful to the amazing young poets of America. I just, we all know who they are. And reading in translation, people seem to do less of. I came of age into an age of translation when, Neruda was just being translated, Borges's poems were just being translated. Rilke was coming out in new translations. I cut my reading on the poets of the world, discovering Thomas Transtromer, discovering Mandelstam, discovering the poets of ancient China, ancient Japan, ancient India, the second century erotic poems from India by women poets. They're incredible. They're so good. And, where do you find that? You find that in a big academic book from Harvard called Sanskrit Court Poetry.
Wow.
So that just tends to be where I go both when I'm reading, because I want to expand my lexicon from the lexicon of my own time and place. And
Well,
I am always curious for company, and the world gives me a lot of company.
the a little heads up that we have a wonderful Poets Corner planned for next March with a translator of Thomas Transtormer.
Wonderful.
And
Which one?
I'm
Which
so
translator?
excited. Let me go get it. It's Patty Crane, and it's the blue horse, the blue
The Blue House, yes.
which is new from Copper Canyon.
Thank you.
So
One of the great publishing houses.
yes. So I'm very excited that she's agreed to come on and talk about her work translating and his work, and
That's fantastic.
yeah.
So I will just name to put two American poets into the hopper, who are both Copper Canyon poets. Arthur Z., our new poet laureate, who I read with great joy every time a new book comes out. And also with a new book coming from Copper Canyon, Danusha Lamaris. There's two Americans for you.
Two Americans whose poetry I love, who've both been on the Poets Corner, and all of our past events are recorded and available on the website. So I highly recommend going back and listening. But let's, we have a few more minutes. Let's get to a couple more questions from the chat.
There was a really great question a little while back. Someone noted, Jane, that porcupines often show up in your poetry, and she wanted you to talk a little about that.
Gosh, is it often? I didn't know there were that many. So the porcupine walked through my life one of the times. I go to artist retreats for a month at a time. I have done this like every other year for my entire writing life. And the porcupine of the poem that I read, I Wanted to Be Surprised, was at McDowell in New Hampshire. I don't think Mill Valley has any porcupines. We have raccoons and possums, but so seeing a porcupine is very special. There are a lot of foxes in my poems. Almost every time I see a fox, it makes its way into a poem. But porcupines are such interesting animals. All you have to do is say the word, and this cloud of associations just comes with it. So that's it for porcupines.
There is also a request that you read Three Foxes by the Edge of the Field at Twilight if you want to. And another question, I don't mean to, you probably have others, Liz, but somebody's asking if you could talk about your love of and writing haiku. And
so you must tell me, do we have a hard close in 7 minutes? Or do we go on for a while? What's that?
That's up to you.
Well, people might have, people on the East Coast might have dinner appointments or something.
Yeah.
But okay, so I don't have to be ready to stop speaking in 7 minutes promptly.
No.
Okay, so could you remind me what the second question? One was read Three Foxes and the other was,
It was about haiku and your
oh,
relationship
yes,
to haiku.
yes. Okay, so haiku and tanka. And I want to include the tanka form, which is older than haiku and 2 lines longer. So haiku are 17 syllables and tanka are 31 syllables. The very first, this is why I say I've been reading internationally all my life. When I was 7 or 8 years old and I took my allowance to the, um, you know, stationery store on the corner on the block of First Avenue between 20th and 21st Street, and my allowance was jingling in my pocket, and I was going to buy my own book for the first time in my life. I looked at all the books on the little spiral stand, and what I came home with was a book of Japanese haiku. So how can we explain it? Urban child, all those poems are poems of the natural world. Maybe I saw that there was something missing from my life and those poems could lead me to it. Maybe I intuited the deeper meaning of them, although it seems impossible to me that at 8 years old I could have understood what is actually being spoken of in good haiku. To this day, I need to you need to steep yourself in them to really feel the meaning under the surface. It makes me sad when people teach haiku to students only as the 17-syllable form and not as the real heart of haiku, which is this juxtaposition that's pointing at something between the two things that can't even come into words. Haiku are tiny vessels of large explosions. They are lightning flashes, glimpses that let you see how big the world is in the dark. Tanka, when I was in college, I took a Japanese literature and translation course and met the poems of the two great classical women poets, Ono no Komachi and Izumi Shikibu. Komachi, 9th century Japan, is their equivalent of Sappho, because writing came late to Japan. Writing only came to Japan in the 6th century. Izumi Shikibu is their equivalent of Emily Dickinson. These are poets that every Japanese person knows their work, the way every American who's gone through school at least knows, I'm nobody, who are you? But they know more of them because poetry is more valued in Japanese culture than it is in America. I read their poems. There were only like 6 of them in English translation, and I was undone by them. I felt like I am seeing my own life in these poems that were written 1,000 years ago in a different culture, in a different language. I feel my own life in these poems. And I waited 15 years for somebody else to do the book of translations that was clearly needed, and nobody did. And then I finally was introduced to the woman who became my Japanese co-translator, and we did the book, The Ink Dark Moon, which is a selection of poems by both of those poets and a lot of front matter and a lot of back matter. I hid an entire course on how to read poetry in the footnotes of The Ink Dark Moon. I have no idea if anybody reads them, but I put it in there. So I didn't read you many very short poems, but I have all my life written very short poems, which are not haiku and which are not tanka. They are, I call them pebbles, and they are kind of hybrids between what I learned from haiku and tanka and what I learned from the long tradition of very short poems in Western literature. The aphorisms, the epitaphs, the epigraphs. There are many very short poems, and I just love how much can you do with how little. And so I have written maybe 3 haiku in my life, and they tend to be labeled haiku. And when people look at my pebble poems and say, well, they're really not very good haiku, I think, what do I have to do to tell you? Put a neon sign over it? No, they aren't haiku. It's not what they're trying to be. They're something else. But anyhow, I love the very short poems, and I always feel badly when I've done a reading and I haven't included more of them than I did here, because all my recent books have little sections with very short poems in them. It is a practice that I love and continue to take up. What else?
Boxes.
Okay, I will read. I will read Three Foxes. I have to find the nice thing about this large book is it has an alphabetical index, which helps me find poems a little faster. Okay, page 116. I greatly admire people who have all of their poems memorized. I have a lifelong terrible memory, and I can't do that. Three foxes by the edge of the field at twilight. One ran, her nose to the ground, a rusty shadow, neither hunting nor playing. One stood, sat, lay down, stood again. One never moved, except to turn her head a little as we walked. Finally, we drew too close, and they vanished. The woods took them back as if they had never been. I wish I had thought to put my face to the grass. But we kept walking, speaking as strangers do when becoming friends. There is more and more I tell no one, strangers nor loves. This slips into the heart without hurry, as if it had never been. And yet, among the trees, something has changed. Something looks back from the trees and knows me for who I am.
Wow, that's lovely.
And I'm not going to comment on that poem. I will leave people to hear in it what I hope they hear in it. Although I will say I've never known whether people understand when I say I wish I thought I'd put my face to the grass, that it was realizing after the fact that I could have smelled a fox by putting my face to the grass where the lying down one had just left.
I'd love to continue on, but I also love to close with poetry in our ears. So do you want to take a few more questions and read another poem, or shall we leave with the foxes in our
Well,
ear?
that's up to the group. I can't see, people don't seem to be pouring out. We're
Yeah.
So they're here. I'll take one or two more questions, and then I have to figure out what poem to end with, unless you want to ask me which one to end with.
No, I'll let you
Another
figure
poem,
that
please, says Elmer M. Do we have
Okay.
any great question, Liz, that you think just can't be left on the table?
There are a couple. Someone just put in, okay, here's one. Can you speak about the irony about writing about silence as, quote, the presence that listens, unquote?
Oh, the question is so delicious. I'm not sure I need to, say anything further besides let's admire the question. I have noticed that throughout my work, in both the essays and the poems, there's so many poems and comments about silence, praising silence. And, I feel silence as the field of listening and the field of possibility. If I'm talking, or if anybody's talking, if you are having a constructed aural, AURAL experience, that is where your attention is. And in silence, your attention is omnidirectional because your ears never close and they hear everything around you in every direction. And it is also, the last thing I'll say about it is it is the absence that allows the new to arrive. This is why I say I listen for my poems. I don't write them, I listen for them. Because when I am saying something, I'm saying that. And I have to hear what the next line, what the next image, what the next impulse is. And that only happens inside of the silence. So I do love silence. Okay, what else?
I do have a request, but if you want to take one more poem of something you might read. I was thinking about today when I could do nothing.
Ah, okay.
Is that okay? Or
That's
do you have
okay. And
something
Liz,
else?
did we have a second question?
You know, there was someone that asked a question a little bit a little while ago that I couldn't get out of my head, so I'm just going to put it out there to you. She said she's often heard you speak about how strangeness has entered your poems,
Yes.
and she wanted you to say a few words about that.
Okay. So this goes way back. So my first book of poems, no one can find, and that's just fine. You know, there are 3 poems from the very first book in the asking, and that's all you need from my very first book. My second book was of Gravity and Angels, and you know there are more poems from that. I like the poems. I stand by some of them. One of them is a poem that I often, you know, will open a reading with. It is still completely present and meaningful for me. But Wesleyan University Press, back then, they put out, you know, a print catalog, and they would ask all of their poets to give them a quote to put on their page in the catalog. And I had a terrible time finding a quote because the poems were all working at the unit of the whole poem. And it also made me look over the book with a slightly different, you know, intention than I had been when I was looking at the poems as the person who wrote them and was trying to decide if they were finished or not. And I came out of that tour of my book feeling, you know, I like these poems. I like these lyric poems, but they're not weird enough. I want to be more strange. I'm not being strange enough. And it was just a perception. Be more odd. And I didn't know how to be more odd, but I threw the request to the muse. I just said, please make me stranger. And by the next book, by the October Palace, the poems began becoming stranger, and they are stranger to this day. It was just an abiding hope on my part. You know, it has to do with, you know, why do I love these poems from other countries so much? You know, magical realism came from South America into American poetry. You know, you just find more strange things when you're reading more broadly. And I love it, and I want to be weird. So that is my relationship to it. I love poems that are not incomprehensible. You know, I'm not interested in total, you know, coleslaw. Although coleslaw has more substance of being than certain incomprehensible poems have for me, and I'm not going to name the authors because some of them are really loved. But I love the poems that are on the cusp. You know, that's why I love Jean Valentine's poems so much. The ones I love best, they're very strange. They're very strange. Certain poems of Ray Armantrout, again, you know, short, very odd. And within that strangeness, just great glittering glaciers of meaning begin to pour off the mountain. It's quite wonderful. So I am going to read you a strange poem that was requested. I saw it go by
Okay,
in the
great.
in the chat, and I noticed it. So this is a very new poem, was published extremely quickly, so it came out in the New York Review of Books, so it is already in print, and it is just a weird poem. And I'm going to read it to you, and then I'm going to say something about it. And then maybe I'll read it a second time. So this poem is called Cows Lying Down. A Holstein cow lying down. It would seem impossible for such an awkward shape to return to standing. yet lifting part by part the unlabeled and milky charts of their being. They do. With two thumbtacks, one black, one white, I entrust this vision of unsupine cows to the future. So that is a weird poem about a weird thing, which is, it's really true. If you look at a cow lying down, especially when they're lying down that way, when their heads are up and they're all like hip, it just seems absolutely impossible they could get back to their feet. It's too weird. The poem is also so first I saw something and I went, that's really strange. And then that second stanza, yet lifting part by part the unlabeled and milky charts of their being, they do. Those unlabeled and milky charts of their being, that is what I mean when I say I like strangeness in poems. And my French translator has already had at this poem, and she said, "What do you mean by that?" And I sent her one of those, pictures of the butcher charts where they label all the parts of the cow that you eat. But of course, these are milk cows. They aren't butcher cows. So they're unlabeled, but they're unlabeled and they're milky charts. But, it's still that butcher chart of the poor cows. Now, I am not going to give you a test here, but I'm going to wonder, did any of you hear in this poem that there is a whole second level going on in it? There is another poem under this poem, and it is a Miroslav Holub before poem. This is a poem talking for the censor, indirectly. And the only real hint of it is that one word, unsupine. With two thumbtacks, one black, one white, I entrust this vision of unsupine cows to the future. So I began writing the poem only about the cows. It started as being about the cows. And then as I was writing it, I realized that it had in it also the possibility of being a poem about all of the lying down and surrender that we have been seeing, the law firms, the universities, the corporations, the media. And so this is a poem about, it might look impossible to stand up, but a cow can do it. And I entrust to the future. Okay, somebody said, could I read it again? Cows lying down. A Holstein cow lying down. It would seem impossible for such an awkward shape to return to standing. Yet lifting part by part the unlabeled and milky charts of their being, they do. With two thumbtacks, one black, one white, I entrust this vision of unsupine cows to the future. So it is a poem of political hope, as well as a poem about cows. So I will close with the poem that you asked me to close with today. Today when I could do nothing.
Before you do that, Jane, I'm going to sneak in one question from me.
Yes.
That's you said you had asked the muse for strangeness at some point. What are you asking today?
Oh, today I just ask for any poem that feels like it can respond to what wants responding to. I'm not making any aesthetic requests. I'm just saying, whatever you give me something. Just, something. Each individual poem might have its own wish, but all I want is to keep writing. So the poem that Meg asked me to close with, some of you might well already know, this was written the first day of sequestration during the pandemic time. It was the day that the Bay Area was told, everybody stay home. I had been very busy right before then. The book Ledger came out on March 10th, 2020. I gave a reading in New York City at the 92nd Street Y to a packed auditorium on the 10th, on the 9th. On the 10th, I gave a reading in Chicago at the Poetry Foundation to a packed auditorium. On the 11th, I gave a reading in Seattle to 20 brave souls in a room that had been sanitized by the owner of the wonderful Elliott Bay Books. And I would have done the Bay Area book launch on that Thursday, but everything was closed by then. So the first day that we were all told to stay, I was already staying home because I'd been on airplanes and I'd been traveling, and I knew that I should stay away from other people for their protection, because I could have brought, Seattle was then the known epicenter. And all of a sudden there was this silence. Everything was quiet. Nobody was doing construction. No one was doing gardening. There was less traffic. I swear there were less airplanes. And this is the poem that came from that. Today, when I could do nothing. Today, when I could do nothing, I saved an ant. It must have come in with the morning paper, still being delivered to those who shelter in place. A morning paper is still an essential service. I am not an essential service. I have coffee and books, time, a garden, silence enough to fill cisterns. It must have first walked the morning paper as if loosened ink taking the shape of an ant. Then across the laptop computer, warm, then onto the back of a cushion. Small black ant, alone, crossing a navy cushion, moving steadily because that is what it could do. Set outside in the sun, it could not have found again its nest. What then did I save? It did not look as if it was frightened, even while walking my hand, which moved it through swiftness and air. Ant, alone, without companions, whose ant heart I could not fathom. How is your life? I wanted to ask. I lifted it, took it outside. This first day, when I could do nothing, contribute nothing beyond staying distant from my own kind, I did this.
Well, Jane, I feel like you did so much for us today. Thank you. This has just been a delight. I don't think we've ever run over before.
Sorry.
I just wanted to so much, and you were so willing to. I thought, yeah, we've still got quite a few people here. Let's do it. So thank you. This has just been a delight and a joy and a gift to all of us on this.
Well, thank
Sunday
you,
afternoon.
Meg. Thank you, everybody who came, and the many of you who actually stayed. I'm impressed. It's a long time. So my great, I'm sorry, I'm sort of looking there.
They're bowing.
Yes, well, I was
Yes.
bowing, but I was also doing something on the computer to check. Thank you, everybody. Be well. Show up next Saturday should you be moved to, and we will all travel through this time together, because that is what human beings do. Even when you're staying home alone, you know, carrying an ant outside. I will just say, to lighten things up a little, that the poem was published very quickly in the San Francisco Chronicle and went kind of viral from there. And I got an email from a woman who was an ant scientist, and she said, oh, their pheromone sense is incredibly strong. If you put that ant down anywhere within, 200 yards of its nest, it got home. So isn't that wonderful?
Oh, that's wonderful.
Okay.
That's great.
So once
It's
again, I will
fun.
say thank you, and
Yes.
and have a good evening, everybody.
All right. Thanks so much, Jane.